Hey guys, it's us again at SME Clinic. Very pleased to have another vlog. I always want to say podcast, but vlog for our audience. And an interview I think you're going to find very interesting. It's my pleasure to welcome Annie McWalter, who's with SAICA Enterprise Development, and who's also SAICA Enterprise Development is affiliated and part of the Hope Factory you might have heard of. And I think most people know SAICA for the CAs, but they are filling a very interesting role that I think, being small businesses, anyone that was trying to access funding realized that the compliance as a small business is something we have to get right. Otherwise, there's many doors closed to us. And Annie, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Please introduce yourself to our audience as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Debbie. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to your SMMEs and to be on this platform with Smart Procurement World. SAICA Enterprise Development. We're an entity of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. And we essentially are looking at mobilizing the accounting profession to bring financial excellence into small businesses. And that is including the aspects of compliance that is required of small businesses. And we do that through all the designations of SAICA. So SAICA is very well known for the CASA designation, but there are also general accountants and also a kind of entry-level designation called accounting technician. And what we do is we actually have a model where we look at providing affordable back office accounting support to small businesses. Often that gets sponsored through enterprise development, because in enterprise and supply development, there's again finding that businesses are not actually keeping up their monthly management accounts. They're not keeping compliant. And so we provide this back office accounting support, but we do that through actually unemployed accounting graduates. So we find unemployed accounting graduates and we place them into the small accounting practices that are partners with us. And these small accounting practices are associated with SAICA. SAICA has about 8,000 to 9,000 small accounting practices who are members of SAICA. And they are actually national. They're all around the country. So these are members. So we place an accounting graduate into the small accounting practice. And then through enterprise development sponsorship, we then provide back office accounting support for an SMME for a full year. So we help them to get their books up to date. We help them to get registered properly with SARS, to get their tax up to date, to get the annual financial statements, to actually get all of their compliance done and cleaned up. And then we are hoping that that business won't just do it once off, because compliance is a constant job. You have to do it all the time. It needs to be maintained. We're hoping that through that introduction, that first year that gets sponsored, the next year that small business will remain with the small practice and then continue to be serviced by that small medium practice, accounting practice. So we provide the support for a year. We also, as part of our program to the small business, we also teach them on the financial concepts of their business. So they need to be able to read a balance sheet. They need to be able to know what their management accounts are telling them. We also do costing and budgeting types of workshops with them. We do aspects of financial excellence that an entrepreneur needs to know, not turning them into accountants, but turning them into people who are financially savvy. And then we have also an element of our program is financial coaching, that the SMME will be coached by the CA who is, part of that small medium practice. They now got the up-to-date management accounts, so they can actually coach that entrepreneur now based off the most up-to-date information. And then we also have another aspect of our program, which is access to funding, getting the SMMEs ready for access to funding. And often that is dealing with compliance issues, but it might be also broadly helping that entrepreneur to actually speak to the financial model of the business, which would then give the comfort of an investor that they know what that that business owner, that they would have the comfort that that business owner knows what's going on in terms of the financials of their business and the financial model of their business. So yeah, SAICA Enterprise Development really is focusing on this area of financial excellence. And what we've seen in the literature, like the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, is that they, for a series of years, have been saying that 2/3 of our businesses in South Africa, and this was pre-COVID times,
Yes.
closed due to financial reasons. So it's one of the reasons that SAICA Enterprise Development exists, is to really actually plug that gap. And we thought, why don't we mobilize the accounting profession to be able to plug that gap, because they are the best financial minds around.
I love the model, because you've actually got small business supporting small business. So you're almost creating a double-edged, not sword, because that sounds negative, but a double-edged way of supporting small business from two angles. You mentioned, compliance sort of pre-COVID. What are the things in terms of compliance that the COVID and what's happened has really spotlighted in this area?
Yeah. Well, what we saw is that a lot of the relief and funding measures that were announced both by private sector and by public sector,
yes,
were all requiring compliance, up-to-date compliance. So they were looking for things like, do you have your tax clearance certificate? Do you have workman's compensation? Do you have your annual financial statements, monthly management accounts? They were all checking for up-to-date compliance. And we found that a lot of the, about 68% of the SMMEs that applied for relief were unsuccessful because they weren't compliant. So, we did see like some of the relief options that were the most successful in supporting SMMEs were the South African Future Trust, the Debt Relief Fund, and the SMME Relief Finance Facility. But what we saw from, like, for example, feedback from Rupert's family's SAICA relief program was that businesses were not tax compliant. They did not provide evidence that the business was viable prior to COVID. You see, some of our relief measures were also looking for evidence of viability before through management accounts. And, they saw a lot of businesses that actually were even insolvent, trying to apply for this funding. And you see, these are all aspects that if you had accounting support, you would be able to overcome. So this is exactly what we're saying, is that we need the small medium practices to be involved to help the SMMEs to make sure that they are actually financially viable businesses and that they are keeping viable.
I'm even thinking when everything started happening in March, and I think it was Vusi Temmakwaya and a couple of others sort of gave these top tips of what must you do now with COVID and lockdown. And one of them was your cash reserves, have at least 3 months. And, I'm trying to think of the 2 or 3 the other things, all related to your financial management. And I suppose also talking to, if you don't know your debt versus your credits and your cash reserves, and you weren't on top of that as a business pre-COVID, a lot of them found themselves in big trouble within a few weeks into lockdown.
So we always hear that cash is king in small businesses, but if small business isn't managing their cash flow properly, or predicting what their cash flow will be, then they're going to be in a very vulnerable position. And it is important for a small business to have that. And I think, a lot of businesses also maybe don't have an up-to-date business plan. A business plan isn't just for when you need to get funding. A business plan should be kept current, that you should be always having a business plan with projected figures, what you're aiming for in terms of your income, what you're aiming for. Each year, you should have a business plan, an updated business plan with a full budget of what you're expecting in terms of your income and your expenses. And you need to be managing and have a full cash flow every year as well. So again, it just shows you that, those things were not in place. And it's like almost driving blindly without having a dashboard in your car. I once got my car fixed and they forgot to put the speedometer connection in.
Whoops.
And I tell you, it is impossible to drive without knowing what speed you are going. But that's exactly what financials are for a business. They like your speedometer. They actually show you how fast you should be going or how slow you should
I
be
love
going.
that illustration. Yes, it's very, very pertinent.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
you cannot manage a business without having your
No.
up-to-date of what's going on in the business. You should have monthly management accounts, kind of telling you what you're doing. Yeah.
I believe that SAICA, from a funding point of view, was awarding just based on application and very little having to go through the compliance and due diligence, which I think helps some businesses. But like you're explaining, can you imagine an insolvent business now applying for funding? Are you funding household expenses or are you funding a business? And what we need is to generate the economy, not just plug holes into it. So I think what SAICA does is phenomenal. I mean, you've been around the smart procurement world for years, and I just absolutely love the model. You spoke a bit about now about funding and what wasn't in place. What advice would you give to SMEs at this point if they were going to go after funding? You might have touched on something, but maybe just sort of summarize your pertinent ideas.
Well, I think, it's important to note that if you want to get funding, you need to actually show that your business is viable, that you are earning. Nobody's going to fund something that doesn't give a return. So you need to actually be showing that your business is actually making money right now. And if you are right now not generating revenue, then you need to maybe pivot your business and prove a concept, and only then go apply for funding. Because it really is important that you need to take a business model that is actually working to be able to get funding for it. You need to show that you've got customers. You need to show that you've got traction. You need to actually show that this is a viable business, that you are able to make money from this business, So I think that would be very important. It's very important to get all of your compliance up to date. I don't know if you'd like me to kind of focus on that for
Yes, I'd like you to touch on it. And maybe just before you answer, if I reflect as our listeners or watchers, definitely go and watch the UIF video. It's very interesting how many companies from a UIF perspective were not compliant and were caught very short with their employees, not being able to tap into that TERS funding very easily enough. Thank goodness UIF was quite generous, but very important to protect, because no one saw this coming. No one saw us being locked down or COVID, and no one knows when it's going to finish. So please touch a bit on that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So look, there are a number of areas that you need to be aware of in terms of your compliance. And I think the very first is just, it depends on what structure you have registered, whether you're a sole proprietor, a partnership, or a company, a PTY limited. We do always recommend the PTY limited structure because it limits the liability on the owner. So it means that if something happens to the business, they're not going to come after your own personal assets to be able to pay anything back. So if you are a PTY limited, then you're registered with the CIPC. And once you're registered with the CIPC, then you're beholden to follow the New Companies Act of 2008 and also the Income Tax Act. And it really relies, it's very specific that the responsibility lies with the directors or the owners of the company, that all the regulations of those acts, so you need to cover them quite carefully, are strictly adhered to. You are required to register your company with the necessary business taxes. And there are a number of taxes, but this is where you need to actually get some advice from a qualified accountant in terms of what would be applicable for your business. So there's business income tax, there's small business tax, there's provisional tax, there's turnover tax, there's VAT. And VAT you need to pay if your business exceeds 1 million in any consecutive 12 months period. Okay. So you need to check whether you need to apply for VAT or not. PAYE, pay as you earn. There's also, you should be looking at the skills development levy as part of your compliance, and also UIF, which you have mentioned was covered in a previous workshops. So not all the taxes are applicable to any business, but that's where you need to, that's why you need to actually speak to an accountant who would be able to advise you on what is applicable for your business.
And again, your model of making accountants accessible to any small business, is this something that if I'm a small business, I'm watching this video, I could just tap into SAICA, or do I have to be on a program with the enterprise program?
Well, first of all, there are many small, medium practices that do exist around there. And so, that is available. You can literally look it up. But what we run specific programs for enterprise supply development. So if you're a Black-owned business and you would like to apply for our program for a year, you would be most welcome to. We are able to, I can provide a link, and they would be able to then register on that link, through that link that they show interest for coming onto the program. We need to just note, though, that we provide the programs when funding becomes available.
Yes,
so
you onboard a group when. Is there any particular sectors? Because I also understand that your funding would come from certain corporate funding. Maybe they want to support ICT businesses, anything like that?
ICT is usually a very popular business that we need to try find for our programs. But we are very much any type of industry, provided that we're looking for businesses who want to actually get into corporate supply chains, and probably more on the non-core type of services, but can be core services as well. So, sometimes we run industry-specific types of programs. For example, we're running programs in the renewable energy sector. And then we'll be looking very much for businesses who are wanting to start new businesses in that sector, specific to that particular sector. So there are those kinds of things, but there is very much the opportunity to kind of apply for a program. These kind of services that I'm speaking about are actually still available to accountants right now. So the 9,000 small accounting practices that are associated with SAICA, a number of them do actually, we're partnering with them to focus on SMMEs. So they are available right now. I just need to also mention that there's also UIF that they need to, which we've spoken about, but compensation is also, something that they need to comply with. BE legislation is quite easy. If you're under 10 million, you can just get an exempt micro enterprise, you get a certificate, but BE legislation is also something that you need to comply with. And right now, there's also COVID-related legislation that small businesses should be applying to as well. There's actually 4 kind of key legislation pieces that State of National Disaster Regulations of 2020, COVID-19 Direction on Health and Safety in the Workplace, the Occupational Health and Safety Act of 1993, and the OHSA Regulations of Hazardous Biological Agents. And there are various services that are available that SMME could actually search for, where they can help SMME to be compliant right now with COVID legislation. But that's quite important.
Other than masks and sanitizer.
Exactly. They need to actually be aware of all the things that they need to be complying with at the moment, because that is a possibility that also they could be fined or even asked to close if they're not compliant.
In fact, a completely side note, I saw an amazing product, an SME. I think I know they're part of Proudly SA, and I think it's like a UV box, and your point of sale device sits in there. So it means it's being disinfected all the time. Because that's always the thing, you go to the shop and you think, do I touch my code or not? And it's quite amazing to see the ingenuity and things that are out there. So absolutely.
And I think that's exactly is that businesses have needed to pivot and adapt. So when you see businesses closing down, it's usually they have failed to adapt to the environment around them. They're trying to do things the same old. And COVID has created a totally new environment, and it's completely changed things. And so it is right now critical for SMMEs to adapt to the new norms, in terms of that as much as possible they need to go virtual. They need to look at means of safety of their customers. They need to care for people, terms of that. So connection is a big part of connecting with your customers right now, even if it can't be face to face. So I think there's a lot of things that this environment right now has created for SMMEs where they will really need to adapt and pivot accordingly.
And look, it's uncomfortable, you know, if you're not up for change. Interesting when you talk about your business pivoting and we talk about compliance. One of the topics I'm hoping to do as an interview is just the consideration of how your compliance will change if you go from, I'm trying to use a really bad example, but let's say you were producing one particular product and now you're doing sanitizers because that's for the market, that's great. But there are HR compliance issues or things that you need to get in line. So also any company completely changing their business model needs to relook at all those things and not think it's in place because it existed on the previous business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there's all that kind of industry related legislation that you also need to be aware of. Exactly.
Annie, it's been an extremely enlightening conversation. You talked to something that's very close and personal. We've seen the compliance issue. Obviously, we work with a lot of the financial institutions. I think you fill a very important gap. So I do hope that more of our corporate partners watch this and see it. And because you've got such expertise in this, you know, you're not just part of a general program, you're really hitting the nail on the head. For SMEs, there's also information below where we'll show you where to go. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing and show you making the biggest impact that you can now with these businesses.
Okay, great. No, thank you.